What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio. And it's time to do kind of the finishing touches on our robot. We've got our front and back panels that we get to attach to try to keep things out of the inside of our robot. We've got our battery mount, robot signal light, and our radio. So I think the radio was in the season-specific box where the coral PVC pieces and the balls were. The robot signal light was in the black crate, as was one of these battery connectors. I think there are other battery connectors also in the gray crate as well. The battery mount and hardware was all in the Andymark box. And this is like some fancy, it's kind of like hook and loop fastener, but it's a little bit of a different shape to it. And this came also in the black crate. So grab all of those pieces as well as your two panels, and then we'll get started attaching everything that needs to be attached to the robot. But before we start, got to give another special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302, Lake Orion High School, for hosting our studio. All right, let's do the battery mount first. So I have the two kind of big plate pieces, which are part of the battery mount, and there is one bag. It says hardware pack for AM14U family vertical battery. We need that. And let's go ahead and open that up. So there is a Velcro strap, which will help hold the battery in. We're going to use that later. We've got two churro pieces. That'll be our first step. And so inside this bag, definitely want to try not to lose any of these parts. There should be 4 of those self-tapping churro bolts that we used before on the frame. So everything else I'm going to put back in the bag so I don't lose it. And let's get our pieces oriented. So on the big square piece here, one side we have 4 holes, and the other side we have 2 slightly bigger holes. These are bigger than these. These are 1/4-inch holes. These are that number 7 or 3/16 holes. Okay, we need the 2 big holes on this side. And this piece here is the bottom of our battery mount. The battery is going to sit right down on top of this. Then our other piece also has 2 big holes on one side. There's a slot in the middle. And then out on the ends, it's got these small holes. Well, those 2 big holes line up with the 2 big holes on the bottom piece. And they're going to be held together by these 2 churros running through those 2 big holes. So we can start with whichever piece we want. I guess I'll start with this squarer one. And the idea is we're going to have to put these bolts through the holes and get them attached to the churros. Now, you can use the power tool if you're comfortable. I actually think in this situation, I don't like using the power tool just because this piece is very small. So if stuff snags and binds up, it's going to start spinning on you. So if you are going to do this with either the driver or a drill to screw this in, make sure this plate is clamped down and can't move on you. Otherwise, it could get a little scary if it starts spinning when either the bolt is tight all the way or something snags. So I'm just going to do it by hand. It's only 4 bolts. How long can it take? So I've got my socket and the half-inch wrench to hold onto the churro piece, and a 3/8 socket to drive the bolt in. And once you get it started, then it's usually pretty easy to just kind of go. That one is tight. Let's get the next one started. Oh, and I should have mentioned, of course, when this is flat on the table, that extra tab should be sticking up. So that tab that's bent on this piece and your churro should be pointing in the same direction. So if your churro is going this way, you're going to have to take it off and do it again. I'm sorry. Same thing with the other churro, should be up the direction the tab is facing. All right, let's get this one started if we can. Because I feel like I can get the first couple turns just by holding this with my hand. Yep, and now we definitely need that wrench. Good. Oops, stay on there. Actually, on this one, I can put the whole box end of the wrench on. The other side, we won't be able to do that because we'll never be able to take it off. But this definitely helps hold it in place a little better. I don't know if I did this one a little crooked or not, but this one is definitely tighter than the first one. Struggling a little more here. All right, we are tight on that one, and we can check on the bottom. It's sitting flat, so I don't think I cross-threaded it, but maybe there was just some burrs or something in the way. All right, so we have this piece done. Tab sticking up and our two churro pieces. Again, this piece is going to come on. The tab should be sticking up. So both of these bent up tabs should be sticking up in the air. And we're going to look to add 2 more of those screws down from the top. And I'm going to get this one close. I'm not going to tighten it quite all the way. And when it's close, and again, if you need to, if yours is spinning, get the 1/2-inch wrench again. But when it's close, I'm going to then go ahead and start the other one. And then we can take them both tight at the same time together. Okay, do be careful on this one as you're twisting it. This tab that's sticking up is right where you can bang your fingers. So I'm going to definitely work over on this side where I'm not near it. Okay, the churro piece is spinning just a little bit on me, so I'm going to get the wrench out. And we are tight on that one. Switch it up, and let's get the other one. And tight. All right, perfect. Now, next step is to attach this into the frame of the robot. So let me bring the robot back, and then we'll get this mounted inside. We have got the robot now. It's back. You can attach the battery mount anywhere you want based on what else you're adding to the robot or how you plan to wire it. If you want to follow along with me, I will be attaching it on the back of the robot, so that's the taller side. That is kind of where it is in the instructions or drawings that first gave. So that's the side we're going to put it on, but know that if you want to put it on the other side, that's okay. You can put it on the front instead, and it's going to work out fine there as well. All right, so this battery mount is going to go with, so we have the sort of the C piece on top here. That C piece is going to go on top of our frame. And that square plate is going to go underneath everything. So if I attach it from the outside, just so you can kind of see, it's going to end up looking like that. But of course, we do that on the inside of the robot. So next step then is to find out where it should go. And we want it generally in the center. Again, nothing says you can't attach it all the way over to one side. But in general, robots are going to perform better when the weight is sort of balanced between the two sides of the robot. So if we put the battery in the middle, then we'll have kind of the same amount of weight on both the left and right sides of our drivetrain. That's going to help the robot be a little bit better at driving straight, a little bit more reliable at making turns or specific movements. Now, will you notice? I don't know. Depends on the driver. It's probably not that big of a deal if the battery's just shifted over 4 inches one direction or the other. But that's the general rules. We want to try to keep the weight centered on the bottom and as low as possible. The other thing is if your weight is very high up, like putting the battery up here would be crazy because when you drive forward and stop, that weight is going to keep going and it's going to make your robot rock back and forth. So you want to keep things low if possible and you want to keep them centered if possible, but those are guidelines, not hard and fast rules. So let's find out where the center is. If I start right on the frames here, that would be this hole. I can just basically go hole for hole. I'll slide in one hole on each side until I guess I got the center. Cool. So that is the center spot. Then I'm going to take the baggie. We have all these tools in it, or all these pieces here, the rest of our bolts. And there are 2 long bolts, 2 round standoffs, and 1 plate. That's all going to be for later. So we're going to drop those back into here. There's also 2 very tiny bolts and 2 very tiny nuts, and those also will be for another step. All right, of course, if you have a bin, you can just pour it all in the bin and be fine. All right, these are the same bolts that we used to assemble the entire frame, so we're going to be doing the exact same thing. We're going to do 4 bolts from the top, and then we'll come around and do 4 bolts from the bottom as well. And you can go in whatever order you want. These are pretty easy to access, so we're just basically going to tighten them down. And we can tighten them down as we go. They're going to stay lined up, especially if you get kind of the first 2. I'm going to start the nut on the opposite side here. If those 2 are in, everything else is probably going to be just fine. So let's get our wrench under here, and we can start tightening it. We're not using button heads anymore, so we're back up to the 5/32 hex key or Allen wrench for this one. I guess I should use the same trick we were using when we were attaching the frames, which is it's faster to take the wrench out and in than the Allen wrench. All right, that one is tight. I'll jump all the way over to the other side and do this one next. All right, and we're tight there. And then we'll just get the other 2 going. It's like we can, or I can just barely turn through the nylock with the short side, so that seems like a slightly faster option. Grab another one. And this too, if you have that handled Allen wrench, that's going to be much faster because you can just turn it like a screwdriver. Right, that's good. I'm going to tip the robot on its side to get access to the bottom, I think. If I can. There we go. And I'm gonna, if you are tipping it on its side, we should probably tip it on the side without the timing belt. I don't really want it resting on the pulleys in the timing belt. So I'm going to tip it this way instead. And the other thing I want to do is I want it to sort of rest on, the brackets, the metal, not the end of the plate. Like out here on the end of the plate where our roller is, that's kind of weak. I don't want it supported on that. So this seems pretty good. And now we can see we have 4 holes down here on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're just going to go through and add a bolt to each of those. And they should be relatively lined up. You might have to squish it a little bit to get them to go, depending on, well, your churros and mostly just your churros, how those attached. If they're a little bit crooked, or the ends of the churros are a little bit crooked, then your plate might be just a tiny bit off. But it should be more than close enough that you can sort of bend it into position here. All right, there we go. Got the nut started. This one's nice because from this side we can just spin. All right, and I'll go ahead and make it tight. I may be sorry. Remember, if you ever try to make it all the way tight and it doesn't go, you can always loosen it back up. And that is a little tight, but I think it's going to go. Just got to get that nut started there. Seems good. All right, next one. Looks good. All right, and then we've got one more bolt to go. And tighten that one up. All right, you should have 2 extra nuts left over that'll be for the very long bolts that we put back in the bag a minute ago. Let's go ahead and tip the robot back up here. And I like to spin it around so we have the same orientation. Okay, next. We open up our little baggie of stuff. Now we need the 2 long bolts, the 2 standoffs, and the plate, and then the remaining 2 nuts from the last step. And these are going to give us a place. We're going to have a strap that goes around, but we need somewhere on this side of the robot to attach that strap to. And so if you take the plate, we're going to drop the 2 long bolts through the plate. Like that. Then the spacers go on. And then this whole thing is going to come into the robot. And we just want to put it centered in between our C here. So I tried to eyeball it. I think I got it right. Yep, so that is in the center. And then we'll just take the nuts on the inside here. And you do want this on the front hole, the one closest to the battery opening here. And same thing, this one, I feel like that edge is a little sharp still. So check yours. It just depends on the process, but I think I want to file that down just a little bit, especially as I keep kind of scraping my hand on it. This top surface, for me, just feels a little sharp. And if you notice that when you're assembling it, you should probably stop and do it before you assemble it. It'll be a little easier. But the outside of it is definitely very, very sharp. Sometimes the way these are made, sometimes they're stamped out, and you can end up with a little lip that's on there that can be very sharp. So we definitely want to not have that inside the robot. Yeah, this end is not too bad. Okay. All right, back to what I was doing. Let's get these bolts tightened down. And that first one pulled it pretty crooked, but I think when I tightened the second one, yeah, that brought it back straight. If it doesn't for you, you can always loosen it up and tighten them a little bit more evenly. Okay, that looks good. Last thing we need for our battery mount here is, well, almost the last thing. We're going to take the remaining very tiny bolts and nuts that match. And these are designed to attach to, attach our plug to this last tab that's bent up. And the idea is if this is just loose and we plug it in, it's generally okay, but we don't want these heavy wires to be pulling on stuff. So if this is fastened here, keeps it out of the way, gives us a nice secure place to attach stuff or to plug the other battery in. And we know sort of like we're not going to have to worry about that connection point as much. So on this connector, there's sort of like a flat side where you can see it has a plus and a minus for the red and black wires. The other side where it says Anderson Power Products and the bottom is sort of got two round bits. We're going to need the flat side facing in, or I think the bolts aren't long enough. So the bolt will go through that hole, and then there are holes matching on the case, on that connector. And if we bring both of these through, they'll stick out just enough on the other side to where we can see the ends of the bolts. And these, in order to tighten them, are going to be a quarter inch wrench or a quarter inch socket for both sides. Okay, so on the other side here, I'm going to try to get this nut started. This is pretty tough because it's in between kind of those curved sections. So I'll use the ratchet to help me kind of finger tighten that and get it started. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom. I can't really spin it too well on that side, but using the same trick like when we were attaching the frames to the drive, if I hold it in the right spot and spin the other end, it will go. And then, let's see, will the socket fit in there? The socket will not fit in there. So I'm going to try to just get my wrench in on this side as much as possible. Oh, it doesn't fit because that side is not a quarter of an inch. That side is probably one size up. It's probably going to be 5/16. Let's try a 5/16 wrench. Yeah, 5/16. OK. So now I'll try to get the wrench on the other side, and we'll just go ahead and tighten that down. Now remember, this is a very tiny bolt, and we are tightening into the plastic housing here, connector housing. So it does not need to be as tight as like our frame bolts were. You'll feel when it gets snug, when it starts getting tighter, you can just stop there. OK, that looks good. So now this connector is connected here. It's not going anywhere. When the battery plugs in, we'll be able to plug the second connector onto that. We've got these two wires coming out that we'll use. This is going to be our main power into the robot. Last step for our battery mount, there is a Velcro strap that we're going to use. So if you get the Velcro strap, if it's stuck to itself, undo it. And one side you'll notice has fuzzy, and then the very end has rough Velcro or hook and loop. I don't know if it's the brand name stuff. And the other side is smooth. We're going to go ahead and attach this into here. We need the smooth side to be facing towards the open battery component or compartment, and we need the rough and fuzzy sides to be basically on that connector we just plugged in. And then down in here, there is a slot that we are going to pass this through. So pass it through the big slot. Okay, and then we're going to bring that end up through. There's a buckle on the other side, so go up through the buckle, pull that tight, and now that would be backwards. Let's do it again. But this time the fuzzy side should be towards the middle. All right. Pull it through. And the idea now is this. If we put a battery in here, we can go around this pillar or around this standoff that we just built, pull it down until the battery is tight, and then we can bring this over and strap the Velcro on. So in fact, let me throw a battery in just so that you can make sure you're getting it going the right way. So this battery is going to be here. We would bring the strap over the top of the battery, feed it down through here, pull it tight, bring the strap back over, and then we'll be able to strap it on. And now that battery is not going to leave the robot. It might be able to rattle around a little bit. I'm not super worried about that. Okay, and then on the other end, we would be able to take our plug and plug it in. But I'm not going to plug it in, and you shouldn't plug it in either, because we have these wires here that are connected to our connector, and they are just, well, this one does still have its insulation on it, but the other one kind of doesn't. Anyway, if we plug this in, these two wires are live, and we could accidentally short circuit on stuff. So don't plug it in until we're ready, but just know that that is where it's going to go and plug in. All right, let's get the battery out of the robot. And we can grab our next piece that we want to work on. Let's go ahead and do the robot signal light. So that is in a white box. It's going to say AB on it and Rockwell Automation. But if you open it up, you're going to get this. So it says Alan Bradley. This is our robot signal light. So what this does is it will blink basically to give status codes of your robot. So if your robot is disabled, it's going to blink in a certain way. If your robot is on and running in autonomous, it'll blink a certain way. So you can use this, or the field crew can use this at events just to make sure your robot is functioning as expected. Now, on the bottom, there is a 3-hole area. It says LA, N, and LB. And this is just a connector. You should just be able to pull that out. Once you pull that out, there is a plastic nut that's on here. So we're going to unscrew that all the way. And then we've got our mount up here that we had for it. Spin it around so it's facing the camera. Okay, we got our mount, which is just a round hole. And all we're going to do is take the light, stick it through the round hole, and then tighten that nut back on the other side. And just to show you, I don't think it matters which direction the nut goes, but if you saw which way it was before we put it on, you can put it back the same way. I think it was this way, so that the flat part is going to go up against the edge of the thing, and the ridged part will be away. OK, but now we'll repeat that process, but with it in here. Right, and just basically as tight as you can make it with your fingers is probably going to be tight enough. If you feel like it's still loose, you could grab a pair of pliers and try to go more, but it's easy to damage it. So finger tight, especially if you turn the light bulb side, you can sometimes get it to turn a little bit more. Then make sure you take your plug, your wire connector, and plug that back in to the light. And I've noticed something as I plug this one back into the light, and that is my connector is sort of pointing not exactly the direction I would want it to necessarily be pointing. Yeah, maybe it's fine, actually. So ultimately, we're going to use a screwdriver on this side, and the wires will come out of this side. So as long as you're turned enough that you can fit a screwdriver in here, like I think mine might actually have to be turned a little bit more this way. So now I can get the screwdriver in there easily. Or we also have the ability to take this off and use the screwdriver. So it should be OK no matter what. And since the wires are coming out the end, they're going to go out, and then we're going to run them down this channel. So that looks fine. I think we're good with that. Let's do our other really easy step. Grab the Vivid Hosting robot radio box. So that's this one. And we need zip ties again. So go ahead and open this up, and we'll take the radio out and unwrap it. OK. Now, the radio, there's a couple things that we care about. If we look at ports on it, this one says DS, this one says aux1. So that is an ability for us to plug other things in. DS is driver station, so if we wanted to plug directly in to control our robot while it is wired, we call that tethered, basically. But when you have an Ethernet cable running from your computer to the robot to control it instead of wireless, that's the port you would use. We have aux1. Aux1, you can plug anything else in. If you have any other network components, if you have a network camera that you want to plug in, if you have I guess that Limelight is a network camera, but there's a fancy network camera that you can buy that does some vision processing for you. So anything else you want to plug in would go there. On the other side, we have another aux port, so you could have two extra things plugged, two cameras plugged in if you had two IP cameras. And then the Rio port next to that. So the Rio is short for Robo-Rio, and that is the main controller of the robot. So that port, we kind of want to be facing down in the robot so that we can plug it into our computer easily. Then the other port, the DS port pointing up, is going to be really easy for us to plug in to test the robot and unplug. Like it's good to keep that one more accessible. The other thing is, on the very end here, we have these 12-volt plus and minus. So this is where we power the radio. We have these little push connectors in here. And so this, if it's pointing down, is also nice because we want to be able to not run the wire up and around the radio, but down straight back to where the rest of the power is. So we'll take this radio, and we're going to find those gray 3D printed mounts that we have here. And the radio, with the Rio port and the power port facing down, should go right into right in between those lines. Now, it might be tight. I've had more success not trying to force it in this way. I've almost had more success sliding it in from the side. But whichever way you want to do it, it should sit all the way in there nice and flat and more or less be held on its own. Obviously, we're not going to trust that during a competition because if it gets bumped, it's going to go flying. Then on the side of the case, there are these notches. And those notches are designed so that when a zip tie comes through, the notch will hold it in place but also help to keep it from moving up and down. And we have the little lips that are doing that as well, the little edges. And on the back of our 3D printed part, we also have notches that match. And those notches are also to hold our zip tie in place. So if I use the kit apart zip ties, the ones that I grabbed and we were using earlier when we put our top frame together, they don't reach all the way around. So if these are the only zip ties you have, we can use 2 of them and make it work. And the way you do that is if you take basically and put one zip tie in the other. Remember, you're still going in on the flat side when you do this. You put one zip tie in on the other and just do it for a few clicks. Just like, I don't know, 4 or 5 clicks, 5 clicks. You could do it maybe even for 1 click, technically. Then now we have what is essentially a super long zip tie. So I'm going to put it so that that first zip tie mark, right, that first zip tie is going to be like, I'm going to put it on the corner of the radio. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to put it on one of the corners. Then we can bring the other end around and get that started. And then it's just a matter of tightening one or the other of them until we end up with our zip tie in a place that we're happy with. Okay, that's pretty good. Now it can't like leave, so even with one, it's probably secure, but we have room on the bottom. Now I'll give you the other option. If you do go out to the store or you have longer zip ties, then it's just super easy. Then you just go all the way around with one zip tie, make sure it stays in those grooves when we tighten it down, and just pull that nice and tight. Okay, we can clip these ends, and just like I was talking about when we clip the ends for our top frame, ideally you want to clip them with a flush cutter so we don't leave any sharp edges. So we'll come in and get right up next to the zip tie and snip them flat. All right, that is done. We have one more thing to attach to the robot, and that is our front and our back panels here. So we're on the back. Let's start on the back. Now, if you remember from who knows how long ago, oh, you know what? We might have to redo the zip tie now that we're here doing this. Anyway, this panel is going to go here, and that zip tie might be just in the way. Might be OK. And this panel basically gets aligned close to the top. It's just below the brackets on the top is the alignment. And then it goes down. And the reason why we want this shifted more or less as high as we can is because when we go to do the battery mount, right, we want to be able to have room to reach our hands through to pull this back through to do it. Now, this panel is going to be removable. We talked about this fastener that we can use, this double-sided fastener. So you will be able to take the whole panel off if you need to. But it's also nice if you don't have to, just for normal things like changing the battery. And if you remember, when we were making this piece, one direction, it is 18 1/4. So this way, it's actually sticking off the edge. It doesn't fit. This way is 18. Or if you made the extra cut, we talked about how you could have it be 18 by 18, which is the official drawing. But I said, you know, since we're making this piece out of the strip that was already cut to 18 1/4, we can save ourselves the cut, and it's going to stick down 1/4 of an inch lower on the bottom here, which if 1/4 of an inch is the difference between you being able to reach the battery mount and not reach the battery mount, then I don't know what to tell you. Then you should have cut it down to 18. So we're going to go ahead and attach this in this area, which means we're going to want some Velcro straps up here. And I'm just going to do a quick mark on the bottom for roughly where the bottom of the panel is, so we know that our fastener is going to be, you know, in a place where we can attach it to the panel. So it looks like about here is going to be good. So I'll just kind of make a mark there. And then same thing on this side, kind of line the panel up. This doesn't have to be exact because I'm not going to try to put it right on the very edge of the panel. Whoops, that moved a lot on me. All right, so like there. So somewhere around here. OK. So we've got 2 lines. We need to make sure we're up a little bit from those 2 lines when we attach our fasteners. And the way that I would go about doing this is we're going to attach them to the frame first, and then we'll peel all the backs off so the adhesive is showing, and then we'll shove the panel up onto them to get them to seat. Now, if you need to be working in some other areas, after you attach the panel, after the adhesive is attached, you want to kind of leave it alone for a bit. I don't know what the official number is, but if you can touch it, if you can leave it stuck on overnight, that's the best, because you want the glue to have a chance to set up and hold everything together. If you stick it on and then immediately pull the panel off, there's a really good chance you're going to pull some of the fasteners off too. All right, but we want about 2-inch pieces, and essentially we're going to put 2 side by side up here, and then 2 side by side down here, and then we'll connect that over to the rest of the robot. Now this thing, it's folded over in the middle, so I'm going to find the end where it's not folded over, where it's just 2 ends connected together. And I'm going to start cutting 2-inch pieces. Now we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here, and we need 8 for the front. So I guess I'm going to go, all right, we're going to go 16 of these 2-inch pieces. And I don't know, what's about 2, I think this frame here is about 2 inches. So if you want something quick to measure without going to get a tape measure, it should be about the size of this frame. So we'll cut 1 and 2, and I think you can handle cutting the stuff, so we'll come back when I have all 16 of them. All right, 16 of them. I'm gonna take 8 of them, and I'm gonna take the smaller of our 2 panels, KB 25020, put that on the other side here. We'll need that in a little bit. And then let's start placing these. So these pieces are the same on both sides. So if you kind of peel it apart, you can see it's the same sort of little, like, I don't know, plastic bits with balls on the end that lock together. And since it's the same on both sides, it doesn't matter which side we stick on, right? We can do it this way, we can do it this, it doesn't matter. So just peel one side off. And we're going to go just a little bit down. I'm almost lined up with the robot signal light. I'm leaving maybe 1/2 inch to the top there. You could probably leave a little bit more. That seems wise. I'm going to leave a little bit more. I'll leave maybe 3/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to try to put this right on the side of the metal frame of the 1x1 box. Then I'll peel another one. And this one, I'm going to sit right next to the first one. And if they're not perfectly lined up, no big deal. If they're sticking off the edge, that's not great because it can slowly peel away. So that's why I'm trying to be very precise here. But for the most part, you know, it's going to work, even if it's over the edge. We're good? All right, then let's jump to the other top section here. We'll peel this one off. And again, I mean, you know, like kind of lined up on that hole there, halfway down that hole. Stick the first one on. I would also say probably if you just did one of these at each spot, it would be okay. My 2 inches are sometimes a little bigger than others. Okay. Then down at the bottom, we have the line that we marked. So we know that's about where our piece is going to end. So I'm going to go the same thing, like up from that line a bit and squeeze one on. And this does not need to be precise at all. And then get the second one right next to it. Cool. And then our last side over here. Again, we've got the line. We're going to jump up a bit from it. Stick one on. And stick another one on. Okay. I'm going to put the panel on in a second, but we, of course, want to peel off. I guess the earlier panels, if you didn't peel this stuff off, it really would not have mattered. Here, if we don't peel it off, then we'll be stuck to the peel stuff. So it's possible that that could start peeling off during the season. That would be bad. So this time, we definitely want to peel the stuff off, although it looks prettier when it's peeled off anyway. OK, so this way is the right way. So this way, for me, fits exactly on the edges of my bars. This way, it would stick over a little bit. And that actually is fine, too. If yours sticks over the edge, it's not going to hurt anything. And I think based on how tall that connector is, we might be okay on this zip tie head being in the way here. Maybe just. Maybe if I push it a little bit out of the way like that, that'll be even better. All right. So remember, our goal is to be sort of close to the top here, right around the bottom of these brackets. And then the bottom is wherever the bottom goes. So make sure you have your orientation for this. I'm going to actually fold this down and lay it down on the table right in front of the robot. So I know my orientation is going to be pick it up and put it back in place. And I did that alignment now while the covers were on, because if you try to align it when the adhesive is on, or the adhesive is exposed and it starts sticking, it gets hard to reposition. So I'm now going to peel off all 8 of the other sides of these. And then I'm going to tip this back up the way we talked about. I'm looking to line up the top just about at the bottom of those brackets. I'm also eyeballing the edge to try to make sure I'm right on the edge of both of the bars. And I'm probably worrying way too much about it, but we'll go ahead and stick the top on. And then you have a little bit of a chance on the bottom to also try to align it as well. And I'm starting to wonder, oh, that looks good. All right, then just go ahead and squeeze it a lot. Make sure you really want to put as much pressure as you can now, just to get the glue to set on it. I will say too, if now that we're past the point where we've attached it, if your box is very greasy or very dirty, you might want to wash that off or clean that off. You can usually use either some alcohol or just some detergent first and then rinse it off and get it nice and clean. The cleaner the surface, the better it's going to attach. And like I said, we don't want to pull this off yet. We're going to let that set up at least for a little bit, at least for maybe an hour or so, if not overnight. Okay, we're going to roll the whole thing around so we can see the short side on the front. And bring back our other set of fasteners and our other panel. This one is 25020. Okay, and this one, same thing, is just going to sit on here. This one generally is going to be even with the bottom of the frame. I never want it to be right on the bottom though, so I'm going to just have it just up a touch. So we can kind of see, I don't know if I need to make marks for me because it looks like the bolt, there are these bolts here, or wherever that bolt line or hole line would be. I'm going to be attaching underneath that, and on the bottom, I'm just going to be, maybe 1/4 of an inch off the top of the frame. It's not the end of if you want it touching the frame, you can also just have it down touching the edge of the frame. That's totally fine. Okay, let's do it. So same pattern as before. We're going to leave 3/4 of an inch to an inch from the top. Stick one on. Next to it. Ooh. Okay. And we can do the other side here. The top on the other side. Get that one started. And our second one. Okay, then we can jump down to the bottom and leave, a little bit of a gap there. The other thing that's good with this too is nothing says the connectors have to go back perfectly lined up. So if the panel's a little bit too high or a little bit too low based on how we initially stuck it on, you can still just put it on, and then instead of having the fastener be lined up at the top, it might be 1/8 of an inch down. So you have plenty of adjustment to this. So it's very, very not super critical. Okay, let's throw our last one on here. Well, that one sticks down a lot. All right, that's fine. Let's peel them. Well, I guess before we peel them, I should do once again. This one's a little bit easier because we know where it's going to go. And yeah, okay, I feel ready. Let's peel everything off. Just do our best to line it up. I'm going to go, like I said, just a hair off the bottom of the frame. And that seems like a spot. And squeeze that on as much as you can. And we're good. So these panels are good for a few things. Number one, we want to keep stuff from getting into our robot, whether it's other robots hitting stuff or whether it's game pieces getting launched around and flying around. So we want to kind of cover these big holes, especially on the front and back of the robot. If you think about it, like when we go to drop the PVC pipe out, if something hits it and it bounces it right back in through this open gap and it falls on our electrical board, that's not good for the electrical board. But also, there are like game piece limits. If we're stuck with one trapped inside the robot, that counts as one that we're carrying. So that's an issue. You might, in the future, want to also think about adding stuff to the sides of the robot because that's very open right now. That's less of a risk for us. The biggest risks are when you go to human load on the back. And if you miss, it could fall in. That's what this panel on the back is especially protecting from. And then the front one we talked about. The other thing that these panels are good for is you hopefully have some sponsors. These are good places to put extra signage, sponsors, your school logo, your team logo, whatever. So these are good artistic panels where you can print stickers, color stuff. You could even take a piece of paper and tape it on the back side so you have that shining through to kind of decorate your robot. All right, let's take a look here. I think at this point, we did the robot signal light, we did the radio, we did the battery mount, we did our 2 panels. That was everything that we had scheduled for this video. That was like the last bits of odds and ends before we're ready to start wiring the robot. So check out the next video where we start wiring it. But before we go, we're going to give a special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and Andymark for parts and support, and to Team 302 Lake Orion High School for hosting our studio.